we're using poison to raise crops. We have crops at 2 o'clock. What do we raise crops for?
Food.
Cereal and grain at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. What do we feed the bulk of the grain to?
Cattle.
Livestock. So
Livestock.
in using this poison to raise the crop, if there were to be a residual effect, do you think it'd be positive or negative?
Yeah, negative.
Okay, so if there's an adverse effect of using this poison on the crop and you feed the grain to the livestock and the livestock don't feel good, who do you call for help?
Doctor.
Veterinary. Okay, the veterinary is at 6 o'clock. He comes and looks at your livestock. What might he recommend you give your livestock to make them feel better?
Probably antibiotics.
Okay, that's at 7 o'clock. What if you want your livestock to grow faster so you can lower your cost of production and be more efficient? Okay, that's at 8 o'clock. What do we raise livestock for? Meat. That's at 9 o'clock.
Beef.
Who eats the meat?
We do.
People live at 10 o'clock. So in using this poison to raise the crop, if there's an adverse effect that could affect the livestock, do you think there's a possibility it could affect the meat?
Absolutely.
So if the people eat the meat and they don't feel good, where do they go for help?
The doctor.
The doctor's at 11 o'clock. After you go to the doctor, where might he send you with a piece of paper with his autograph on it?
Pharmacy.
Does that present a positive cash flow for the companies in the center of the circle?
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?
Howard, student of the soil, how the heck are you?
Thankful to be up and around yourself.
Amen. Good. Well, hey, thanks for joining the podcast.
Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and share information.
You know, you're like a brother from another mother. I had the first time I had maybe a somewhat indirect interaction with you. I had a good friend, my best friend is at AT&T store, was like, dude, I just ran into this guy and he was like running into you. You guys are into the same stuff. He's talking about the same things. He's as passionate about vaccines as you are. And you know, not only in the farming industry and the soil industry, he's like, dude, it was like talking to you. And I said, what's his name? And he told me your name and he gave me your number to reach out to you. And then, and we crossed paths at all these events, and it's like, man, we're kindred spirits, you know. And the first time I met you, I was like, dude, I love this guy. So Howard, I'm just really thankful that you're sitting down with me today just to really talk about the same topics that we're both passionate about and whatnot. So why don't you give us a little bit of a 30-second rendition of what you're all about and your background, and then, you know, just what you're all about.
I'm a student of the soil. Began this journey in 1989. I believe it's the good Lord put me on this path for a reason. That's when we converted our family farm to what was known as alternative methods at that time. Today it's known as regenerative. In 1992, I started working as a crop and livestock nutrition advisor. I've been blessed to work with family farmers across the U.S. and Canada, helping them reduce their dependency on synthetic chemicals and improve the health of their soil, their crops, and their animals and their families. In 1994, I started studying GMOs. 1997, I started doing on-farm research. I've been blessed to be mentored by literally the best scientists and researchers in numerous spaces on that subject along the way. 2008, I coordinated a scientific study that didn't get published until 2013 partly because of how damning it was to GMOs. And I've just continuing today to do what I can to help educate people. On our farm, we direct market beef, pork, chicken, turkey, lamb, eggs. I milk a cow by hand every morning when I'm home. And that's my story.
So tell me, Howard, obviously there's a lot of, talk about GMOs. And, I think I remember like prior to 96, was it that most soy was, non-GMO. Then 96, they started modifying soy. And then now it's like the tables have turned, like 96% of soy is GMO. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but tell me why, in your opinion, what you know about GMOs and why they're so harmful.
Well, as I said, I was blessed to be mentored by the best. Dr. Arpad Pustai was one of my mentors. Dr. Pustai is the poster child scientist in the world for doing a sound scientific study on a GMO crop and what happens to you when you tell the truth. He believed that the BT potato would be positive going into that study, and it was a $2 million plus study. And at that time, that was a huge amount of money. And they did everything right. They measured everything. And when he fed the GMO potato to the rats, it caused such adverse harm to literally every organ in the body. And he told the truth. And he was crucified as a result of it. His career was basically ended overnight. 350 plus peer-reviewed published studies, absolutely recognized as an expert in his field of research in lectins. He helped me understand. There was a lot of debate in the early days. Well, is it the BT toxin that's causing the harm? It doesn't matter what they're inserting. It's the process of the insertion that is causing the disruption to the genome of that plant. And he said, Howard, here's two potatoes. They're identical. We can take a gene out of this one, insert it into this one. And he says it's a process of the insertion that there's a 95+% chance that you're going to have a foreign protein in the fruit of that plant. Well, when that foreign protein enters the digestive tract, it sets the immune system on alarm. And the way I visualize this in the presentations, I have a picture of an 8-foot tall brick wall, 2 foot thick, and a man pushing against it. Okay, the brick wall is the foreign protein that has just entered the digestive tract, and the man is the immune system. So your immune system detects this foreign entity that enters your digestive system. It does its job. It goes on alert 24/7, 365. It's pushing against this brick wall to try and get rid of it. Well, what happens if you push against a brick wall 24 hours a day? Your strength depletes. And I maintain that the number 2 reason for ill health in our country is the foreign proteins in 85+% of the processed foods, because it's challenging the immune system of literally every mammal that consumes it. And the number 1 reason for ill health is a lack of nutrient density in the food supply. And that's a long story in and of itself. Number 2 is the foreign protein. Number 3 is the chemical contaminants, the glyphosate residue, the AMPA, the host of toxins that we can consume either in the water or the food supply. Then you throw in the electromagnetic frequencies, the injectable toxins, and the lack of exercise, and voila, perfect storm.
So how are they modifying these crops? Because I've gotten, debates with people like old time farmers and like, well, we've been modifying crops forever. I'm like, splicing one plant with another is not GMO. I mean, they're using are they using CRISPR technology to go in?
Now, now that's the technology that's being utilized. The first insertion process, it was a shotgun type device that they blasted the trait into the genome of that plant. They had no control over where it was going to hit or how it was going to affect the makeup of that plant. It was never consistent. If they did it 10 times, it went in 10 different places. And I used to say you had a 1 in 100,000 chance of getting it in the same spot twice. And a retired molecular microbiologist by the name of Toyoka Suduka who used to be at Washington State University, heard my talk way back when in Washington, and she politely raised her hand and she says, "Howard, your odds are way too good." Because she had done this repeatedly and consistently as part of her research at the university. And she sent me a slide with an illustration, and it's 1 in a sextillion to 1 in 100 sextillion chance that they could put it in the same spot twice. Well, again, the reason that was important, the good Lord's the only one that knows what each of the molecules and function of the makeup of that plant is supposed to do and how it's supposed to function. Well, when you blast something in there and you damage this one, you damage that one, you damage this one, it's like shooting a cue ball into the triangle when you're breaking for starting a pool game. You have no control. It's going to bang. Okay. CRISPR, they say, well, it's more precise. It is, to the extent that they can cut and snip and remove, but guess what? They have zero control over the interspatial relationship of the genome of whatever it is they're editing. Again, the good Lord is the only one that knows how to put this together. So I'm going to cut and snip and I'm going to take it out. And guess what? That everything gets altered. And every time there's been a sound scientific study conducted to look for a side effect, guess what? They find a side effect. And as Dr. Perro has so amazingly demonstrated in many of her writings, she says, now we've got this technology. You can buy it online for $160, and you got people messing around with their garages doing CRISPR alterations. This is so dangerous. You can't begin to describe it or imagine it as far as how wide Pandora's box can open up. And Dr. Huber aptly says, the biggest inhibiting factor to successful genetic engineering is genetic engineering. As long as they refuse to recognize the shortcomings of the technology and do nothing to address it and to improve on it, it's never going to work. And it's just, the regulation is not there. There's no, it was illegally approved by FDA in our country in the first place. Stephen Drucker, who was an attorney, sued the FDA and won that lawsuit and proved that they illegally approved GMOs. It was called generally recognized as safe and substantially equivalent. And a man by the name of Michael Taylor was in the right position at FDA in the first Bush administration when this approval happened. Well, that same Mr. Taylor, when Dr. Huber, Dr. McNeil, Bob Streit, and two other gentlemen and myself had a meeting with USDA in 2011, I brought this up to him. Well, Mr. Taylor was in a different position in a regulatory agency by that point in time. Well, guess what? Mr. Michael Taylor's most notorious career accomplishment is that of being an attorney for Monsanto. So did we have a case of the fox guarding the henhouse? And there's never been the knowledge or the political will to set this thing aright. Even today, it doesn't exist.
Howard, I feel like we could talk all day. I feel like there's so much we need to unpack here. I mean, first of all, why are we having GMO foods? Is it because they can put patents on them and they can control the food industry? Is it because it's like we want to be more resistant to bugs? What's the main point behind GMO? Why?
In the start of my GMO education presentation, I have a slide multiple slides, depending on the time, and it shows the technology fee that's assessed on the genetically engineered seed. And in 2012, I sat down and I did the math, and I figured all of the acres of corn, soy, cotton, canola, and sugar beets in the United States. And at that time, you could figure how much technology fee there was because they charged you this much for the seed and this much for the technology fee. Today, it's hidden. They don't show you that breakout. But in 2012, I presume that 100% of the corn, soy, cotton, canola, and sugar beets in the U.S. and Canada was the latest and greatest genetically engineered. It was planted at this rate per acre, and that equated out to X number of dollars. $9.9 billion was the tech fee for all of the acres in the US and Canada that year. Now, it hasn't gone down since then. What might be the motivation? That's not the seed cost. That's not the fertilizer cost. That's not the chemical cost. But when you look at the big picture of the companies involved, they're one and the same. The genetically engineered seed company is owned primarily by the pharmaceutical /chemical company.
It's a giant cartel.
It presents a profitable situation for them.
And it's a giant cartel. I mean, I've heard sayings out there: he who controls the oil controls the economy, but he who controls the food controls the people. I mean, we're getting
well.
rich on food.
I'll send you a book entitled "The President Makers" that demonstrated who and how and why they did what they did to our country. I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Yeah, I would love that, Howard. I mean, I think we are in interesting times. I love how you bring it back to the Lord, because it's like, we're playing God with our food. And, it's, to me, it's, they're going against the way God created food to thrive, and going back to regenerative methods and the soil. I mean, we use three main ingredients right now in commercial monocrop farming. I mean, what is it? Phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. Is that right? The main three. And the soil's depleted. And I've heard things like we need to let the soil rest every 7 years too, and we're not doing that. Well,
number one, when the fruit came off the tree, things went the wrong direction. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have the guidance from Scripture that, by the sweat of your brow you will eat, and thorns and thistles shall infest the ground. So sin put us here. But when Gabe Brown is a really good friend of mine, and recognized worldwide as one of the pioneers in the regenerative space. And I've had the privilege of digging in his soil with my spade, and it's just amazing. And when you look at where it was and what it came to, because he had way less topsoil and organic matter to start with than we had in my part of the country. And when you step back and look at how nature, the good Lord knew what he was doing when he designed this and gave it to us. And I took Dr. Elaine Ingham's classes in 2003, and she drew a roadmap, if you will, for how the biological functions in the soil work. And it's all documented. It's published. It's, nobody can say, well, there's not science behind it. There is. But when we use this proper education and understanding and work with it and work in line with the good Lord's design, it's pretty amazing what we can do. It's never going to be perfect, but okay, rainfall infiltration as an example. I live in a river bottom, so this is a very important subject to us. We've been flooded 8 times in the last 8 years, and not necessarily once a year. Last year was the worst. It was, the worst of the worst of the worst. They said we'd never have water ever that high. Okay, after the water went down and the damage had been inflicted, we had the NRCS come out and we did water infiltration tests on our farm. And you drive a 6-inch tube in the ground that far, and you put a measured amount of water in it. You time how long it takes to go in the ground. In row, the first inch in our field went in the ground at a rate of 16 inches per hour. Across the fence, in a conventionally farmed field, it took forever. Long story short, our ground, and we did 2 inches infiltration. You do in row, between row, and you combine all of those numbers. They did that same comparison at another regen farm and across the fence. The 2 regen farms that they did water infiltration tests took 5.39 inches per hour with the full gamut of the trial. The conventional was less than an inch. It was 0.98. Across the fence at my place, that ground wouldn't take more than 0.43. Wouldn't take a half inch of rain in an hour, which didn't surprise me because I watch that field move downhill every time it rains. Okay.
So the healthier the soil, the more permeable.
Absolutely.
Right? Less clay.
No, just, structure, flocculation. When you dig up healthy soil, it looks like chocolate cake. When you dig conventional, it's layered and there's no structure to it. It may be sandy looking, even though it's black in color. But okay, there's 27,154 gallons of water in an acre inch of rainfall. Okay, I take that 5.39 and 0.98 and I extrapolate that towards a section of land, which is 640 acres. Then I extrapolate that to the acres in the watershed. And I did a presentation on this in Rock Valley, Iowa this spring. And I had to go online to get a calculator to figure this math because it was 1,074,000 acres and change for the Rock River Basin. Well, then I showed a picture of all the damage that had happened once again, to the city of Rock Valley. And now they're literally moving it up the hill because this flooding is going to keep getting worse. As the health of the soil continues to deteriorate, the flooding will worsen. And it doesn't matter what the rain event is like, because sick soil is sick soil and it won't allow water to soak in. So when it can't soak in, it runs away. And that causes pollutants to enter the water system, the rivers and the lakes. It's just a vicious cycle. In Iowa right now, there's a big lot of publicity in the news about the water, the runoff and the water quality, and the people in the urban areas are getting very upset about it, which they have a right to be. Why shouldn't they be able to have a clean environment to live in? Well, when you damage the soil, you disrupt the whole water cycle. The water won't go in the ground when it does rain. And when you don't get rain, you don't have that water supply to draw from. Plus, again, picture chocolate cake for structure and twice in a while, 3 times in a while, earthworm holes. Well, that's healthy versus layered. That's what you'll see in the abused and traditionally farmed land to a great degree. No-till by itself does help it, but it's not the answer long term, because when they stop tillage, then they depend more on synthetic inputs in many instances. So no-till is a no disturbance of the soil is a critical component to regenerative farming, but you have to put the whole thing together.
Right.
In order to feed the microorganisms in the soil, we need a plant living and growing and producing or completing the photosynthesis cycle. Go back to 5th grade science. Okay, walk outside on a sunny day, hold your hand up to the backside of your hand to the sun. You feel heat or energy. That plant takes that energy from the sun, grabs the carbon from the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That makes a simple sugar. This simple sugar feeds that plant, and then that plant exudes that into the soil through its root system. And when those exudates go into the soil, that stimulates the microorganisms. Dr. Ingham says it's like giving cake and cookies to the microorganisms. Well, what happens when you give cake and cookies to kids? They go into overdrive. The same thing happens in the soil. We'll see a blossom effect of the microbial activity in a positive way. We know cake and cookies are not good for kids today, but just bear with me. So the more diversity you have in plant species that you incorporate into this cover crop mix, the more diversity you're going to have in the microbiome of the soil. The importance of gut health. The gut and the soil are in essence the same function. You need a broad, diverse mixture of the microbial population. And when you design a cover crop mix, we'll put cover crops behind all our short season crops, our small grain crops. Well, we'll put 10 to 14 different species in there because that broadens the diversity of the microbial population that we get to feed with that crop just by having it grow there. Some crops grab nitrogen from the atmosphere. The legumes, they'll pull 76% of our atmosphere is nitrogen. Why do we have to buy fertilizer when you can get it for free by putting the right crop there that will grab it and fix it in the soil so you can use it for the subsequent crop? And the first year that Burley County, North Dakota did a cover crop trial on the research farm they bought, they did 7 different species. They had oats, wheat, barley. I don't remember all of them. It doesn't matter. Well, then they had combinations. They had the singles, they had the doubles, they had 3 together, and then when it got to the end, they put all 7 of them in the same thing and seeded it together. They got enough rain for all of them to start, and then it never rained the rest of summer. All the singles died, all the doubles died, all the triples died. The one that they threw 7 together was shirt pocket high. And it was so stark when you walked out there and you're like, now, if this don't help you understand and realize the importance of the diversity, Dr. Ingham taught us in class, okay, when mammals reproduce, there's perspiration. When organisms reproduce, there's respiration. The organisms, when they reproduce, they split and divide. Well, as they do that, they literally generate moisture. So as the plants fed the microorganisms in that soil, the microorganisms, we got the symbiotic relationship. They're literally generating the moisture they needed to keep the activity up so that they could give the nutrient to that crop when it was shirt pocket high, when it didn't rain. So it's and the sad part of this whole thing is there's no basic understanding of this taught in elementary school or VOAG class or at our higher education institutions.
It's sad. It really is. It's all about monocropping and production, and we're sold this lie, this bag of goods, that this regenerative method of farming cannot feed the world. We need to have pesticides. We need to have synthetics. We waste all this ground basically doing it backwards to what you're saying. I mean, we live, I mean, you're in the Siouxland area, right?
I'm 35 miles north of Sioux City.
Yeah, so I grew up in Sioux City. I mean, we were surrounded by cornfields and soy fields, and they use thousands of acres to produce one crop. So the soil that you're talking about is layered, and it's going to cause problems. And so our soil is depleted. Our soil is deficient. And basically what you're saying, I mean, the more diversity, the more probiotics, the more, I always tell patients, get on a soil-based probiotic because, this bacteria is a symbiotic relationship. We need this bacteria. We need this good bacteria in our biome. But when the soil is depleted, the biome is gone, the bacteria is lower, and it's not as diverse. And you're saying that the nutrient is dependent on the health of the soil. And so
absolutely. And Dr. William Albrecht was one of the pioneers in the nutritional balance, macronutrient balance. He was at the University of Missouri. Well, the industry beat him up because they were able to influence policy to where the funding that went to our land grant universities, which was a consistent flow, so that, okay, as Dr. Huber so aptly explains, the function of production agriculture is to provide a safe, abundant food and fiber supply to support the economy of the country. Well, and you'll see this somewhat in the President Maker's books. You got to read between the lines a little bit, but you'll get it. Believe me, this will be a page turner for you. Rockefeller and all of his friends altered the production model of the tried and proven concepts of production agriculture and made it dependent on synthetics. They hijacked our land-grant university and they hijacked our medical schools at the same time. In essence, they had hijacked the entire education system for the purpose of dumbing down the population and enriching themselves. Because on the one illustration I used towards the end of my GMO education presentation, there's AstraZeneca, Syngenta, ChemChina in the top of a circle, Bayer's in the middle, Pfizer Pharmacy up, John Monsanto's in the bottom. And I put the circle, and then there's, in essence, 12 hands of the clock. Well, we start at 1 o'clock. And I asked the question first, do you recognize the names in the center of the circle? AstraZeneca, Syngenta. If you've ever seen a commercial on TV that says if you can't afford your medication costs, contact us. We have a program to assist you. Brought to you by AstraZeneca. Have you ever heard of the herbicide atrazine, one of the oldest herbicides used in corn production, made by AstraZeneca Syngenta? And AstraZeneca Syngenta is the number 4 producer of genetically engineered crops in the world, and they were bought about 5 years ago by ChemChina. In the middle, okay, when you see or hear bear, what's the first thing you think of? If you have a headache.
Pharmaceutical.
Okay, what if you have a headache?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Aspirin.
Right, aspirin.
Okay, the makers of Bear Crop Science and Aztec insecticide and Liberty herbicide and genetically engineered crops, and they may likely go down in history as the dumbest investment ever made by a company when they bought somebody called Monsanto for $63 billion and took on all the liability of the damaging effects of glyphosate. But anyway, then we go to the bottom. Before Bayer bought Monsanto, did you know that Pfizer Pharmacia Upjohn was a parent company?
I did not know.
For a brief period of time. So we've established the fact that all these chemical pharmaceutical companies in the center of the circle are in the chemical and pharmaceutical business. So back to 1 o'clock. We're going to put chemical on the 1 o'clock line. Give me one word that you would use to describe a chemical that kills a weed or an insect, and you're describing it to a 5-year-old child. What one word might you use?
Weed killer or Roundup. What is it? Glyphosate.
You're going to use one word to describe a chemical that kills a weed or an insect, and you're describing it to a 5-year-old child. What one word might you use? Some people think of skull and crossbones.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so poison.
Poison.
We have chemical at 1 o'clock. We're using poison to raise crops. We have crops at 2 o'clock. What do we raise crops for?
Food.
Cereal and grain at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. What do we feed the bulk of the grain to?
Cattle.
Livestock. So
livestock.
In using this poison to raise the crop, if there were to be a residual effect, do you think it'd be positive or negative?
Say that one more time.
In using this poison to raise the crop, if there were to be a residual effect, do you think it'd be positive or negative?
Yeah, negative.
Okay,
Negative.
so if there's an adverse effect of using this poison on the crop and you feed the grain to the livestock and the livestock don't feel good, who do you call for help?
Doctor.
Veterinary. Okay, the veterinary is at 6 o'clock. He comes and looks at your livestock. What might he recommend you give your livestock to make them feel better?
Probably antibiotics.
Okay, that's at 7 o'clock. What if you want your livestock to grow faster so you can lower your cost of production and be more efficient? Okay, that's at 8 o'clock. What do we raise livestock for? Meat. That's at 9 o'clock.
Beef.
Who eats the meat?
We do.
People live at 10 o'clock. So in using this poison to raise the crop, if there's an adverse effect that could affect the livestock, do you think there's a possibility it could affect the meat?
Absolutely.
So if the people eat the meat and they don't feel good, where do they go for help?
The doctor.
The doctor's at 11 o'clock. After you go to the doctor, where might he send you with a piece of paper with his autograph on it?
Pharmacy.
Does that present a positive cash flow for the companies in the center of the circle?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. It's all related. That's very well done, Howard. We are going to.
I did that illustration the first time on a tear sheet here in South Dakota for a group of farmers at the VFW Hall in 2004. It's changed over the years as the consolidation and the companies have merged and been bought out, but the concept's the same. Back then, I didn't believe it was intentional. Today, it's hard to find evidence to suggest otherwise.
It's all related. This is the topic too of, we're both I am adamantly against all vaccines, and you have this, what I always say that what the seeds are to the farmer to bring a crop, vaccines are to bring to pharma profits, and now it's like bringing the farming industry involved. If they can make our food sick and depleted to cause us to be sick, it could be $1 billion industry. I mean, we right now Americans are suffering. 80% of Americans are suffering the chronic disease. 60% of our children are suffering the chronic disease, and you wonder why we're so sick. It's not, and it's in our food. That's a massive, Howard. So guys like you understanding this model and can explain it so well. It's vitally important because we can't neglect the food industry when it comes to our health. And there's a saying out there that we're fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and we're treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. And I think that disconnect is very much intentional, like you're implying. It's hard to have evidence to suggest otherwise, but
I believe we have
Go ahead.
two segments in production. You have commodity production, you have food production. On our farm, we focus on producing food. In commodity production, you do everything you can to be the least cost producer to grow the most bulk at the least cost. It doesn't matter what the end product is like. It's all about how much money can I make doing it. That's what commodity production focuses on. Food production, we're going to focus on as much nutrient density as we can possibly get without contamination. And it's the commodity production, you got to get bigger or get out. They've instilled that mentality for many, many years. And way back when, I thought I really don't want to play that in that race. And of course, when we saw the improvement in the health of our animals when we switched our farming practices, and then I started selling meat to people that had health issues because they couldn't consume the food in the grocery store, the light started to flicker back in these dim corners in my brain, and I thought, wait a minute. Well, then one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. And yeah.
So it's crazy to me. I mean, sin has entered the world, and you see things getting, I don't know how you say it. I would say worse. And this is an issue that's growing out of control. So what do you think? Obviously, regenerative methods are the solution, but we're up against the Goliath here. And do you see the tides turning here? Do you see changes happening? Do you see the fruit of your works?
I'm more optimistic than I've ever been, even though there's more evidence of attempt to control more extreme than there's ever been. And the reason I say that, 1989 is when I started, the good Lord put me on this trail. I've watched the economic turndowns that have happened along the time. And guess what? The demand for nutrient-dense food that doesn't contain contaminants continues to go up. No government entity or no individual in government is going to solve this problem. That's not going to happen. And anybody that expects that to happen is woefully naive or something else. The number one political problem in our country is the electorate. When Ben Franklin came out of the Constitutional Convention, they asked him, what kind of government do we have? And he said, a constitutional republic, if you can keep it. In order for a constitutional republic to function properly, you have to have an electorate that understands the Constitution and will elect representation that will strictly adhere to it. And if they don't hold their feet to the fire, if they don't listen when you hold their feet to the fire, kick them out and put somebody else in that will. We have the worst government that money can buy as a result of the electorate not doing their job. But go back to the dumbing down that has taken place in our education process. We don't teach the Constitution. Civics aren't taught in school. The education system is designed for programming. It's not for critical thinking. And that's where the homeschoolers and the homesteaders, that's where this thing is going to get fixed, and that's where it's going to grow, and that's where the Gabe Browns and and the Will Harrises and all of the other pioneers in that space. And guess what? When we build this thing from the ground up, you have more local production, you have more local sales, you have more local economic activity that's necessary. You're not siphoning all the money away to the pharmaceutical and the chemical companies, which in many instances are one and the same. And they coincidentally own a lot of the seed. The only one that doesn't come out on with multiple benefits in a regenerative system is the ones that are making the money off of making everything and everyone sick. Everyone else thrives.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're hopeful and optimistic. I do believe, I always say the soil for truth is rich, and the people are starving for it, literally. And I think that we need to be more keen on knowing our farmer and knowing where our food comes from now than ever before. I mean, so many people go to the store, they have no idea where their food's coming from. They buy the meat, they have no idea. They buy this processed garbage that's probably laced with GMOs. And so it's important that we know our farmer, grow our gardens, grow our foods, and vote with your dollar. I think it's, I do believe that the tides are turning.
And the, organic used to mean something. Ever since USDA got involved in the organic rules and regulations, they've done a continual implementation of policy that bastardizes or degrades the quality. The biggest sin, in my opinion, that USDA ever did in the organic rules and regulations space was allow the application of CAFO manure on certified organic land. CAFO manure, of course, comes from confined animal feeding operations. They're feeding Roundup Ready corn and soy, which is laden with glyphosate and AMPA. This was documented many years ago. Dr. Michael McNeil at Algona was the first person that I knew of to flag it up. And now we've got a mountain of information that shows the glyphosate and AMPA residue in that manure that's going on the certified organic land. In my opinion, that's a significant contributor to why we see the contamination of glyphosate and AMPA in certified organic products. And, the good news to that story is today we have identified microorganisms that are naturally occurring in nature that have been combined and have the ability to remediate glyphosate and AMPA residues from the soil. That's already been published. Dr. Huber and Dr. McNeil were part of that study, the original one that was done with the paleo product in Wisconsin. They did another study on cotton, and they showed a 25% yield increase as you got rid of the glyphosate residue in the soil. And the glyphosate residue in the soil is a huge problem all around the world.
It is.
There's soil tests that have been done. Pardon?
What do we spray? 80 million pounds? We spray 80 million pounds of it every year on our soil?
I don't have that number. I don't have recollect of the current number. It doesn't matter how much we put out. If you don't do anything to get rid of it, it's going to stay there. The half-life, I can show you one study where the half-life is 22 and a half years. I know another study that was conducted, a 3-year study down in Mississippi, never got published because the Soybean Association funded it. And when the results came out, they would not allow the researcher to publish the study. I just happened to know about it because he was a friend of mine. He couldn't show me the study, but he told me. They put glyphosate on 3 years in a row in high CEC, high pH soil. They reclaimed 100% of it 3 years later, zero breakdown. So if anybody tells you, it's harmless, it's innocuous, it just goes away, it's not a problem, they're either ignorant or they're lying through their teeth.
Oh my goodness. And you wonder why we have 50% of Americans?
Pardon?
You wonder why we have 50% of Americans or the stats are that they're going to get cancer. 1 out of 2 people.
Well, there's multiple avenues from attack from that. And I'm, again, I'll send another email, and the one I sent maybe ended up in your spam folder where I have this illustration of the big picture. It makes perfect sense when you look at that. This is a brilliant business plan on their part. It's immoral and corrupt to no end, but it's a brilliant business plan.
Yeah, right. Well, Howard, where can people find you put a plug in and give us a last word here as we close this out. And I just want to thank you for all your wisdom and time. I think we need to have you back on for another part 2, just because I think you bring so much wisdom to this area, and especially as a Christian, someone that has faith, understands the big picture here, is something that I value and respect so much. So just give us the last word of encouragement and let people know where they can find you, Howard.
My only presence is the Facebook page that I have. I'm not techie. I've never set up a website. The meat we sell from our farm is word of mouth, and we literally have a 4-month waiting list on beef right now. But we'll fill the orders, and as we take on new customers, we make sure we take care of our existing customers. And the good news is the manufactured epidemic called COVID, in my opinion, has done more to raise this level of awareness of the corruption and the need for change. There's people that have done a 180, which you have witnessed as well throughout this whole thing, that we thought could never be converted. And the truth will set you free. And we need to keep spreading the truth and getting it out there. And I'm reminded of my one pastor. He said, okay, there's law and there's gospel, and you deliver both with the same approach. You have to deliver it in love. And that's a hard lesson to learn, depending especially on a person's personality. But we need to keep delivering that message in a way that is acceptable, and keep in mind that when people aren't able to consume nutrient-dense food on a regular basis, they're not capable of functioning up to their full potential. And that's not a diminutive comment in any way, shape, or form. It's just reality. There's numerous studies that have showed what happens when you improve the diet. So, the good news is, like our friend RFK has said, nobody goes from our side to their side.
Right.
They go from that side to our side. They don't go back.
Yes, right. That's the truth. Well, Howard, wise words, my friend. I just value you, appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. If you're listening to this, please share this far and wide. Love and support this podcast. We love you guys. Thank you for all your support. Howard, God bless you, my friend. I'll be praying for you in the fight that you're in. And I'm very thankful for men like you that are willing to stand in the gap, because I know standing in the gap is not easy to do. Just like Martin Luther King Jr. stated, that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. God calls us to be bold and courageous. Howard, thank you. I will continue to pray for you, and that God will be the lamp at your feet. And thank you again for coming
To
on.
August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?